Iran has been militarily defeated, but it doesn't want to admit it. The IDF expanded its strikes in Iran beyond nuclear and missile facilities on Monday, hitting government and internal security targets as well, in order to try and force Iran to acknowledge its defeat. But instead, Iran's evil regime sent out a triumphant message bragging about getting the last shot in, destroying a civilian apartment building and murdering a few more Israelis at the last minute before a ceasefire went into effect. United States President Donald Trump had already announced a ceasefire scheduled to start at 7 a.m. Israel time, but the Iranians decided to try and get a few more barrages of ballistic missiles in, and so here in Israel, we all got the alerts on our phones starting at 5:30 a.m., then again at 6:09, and just as we were leaving the bomb shelters after that alert, we got one more at 6:32. When we emerged from that one at 7 a.m., we saw the devastating blow of a hit on a residential building in the Israeli city of Be'er Sheva, resulting in at least 4 fatalities with many more wounded. A few moments later, the Iranian regime posted a picture of the destroyed building and in Be'er Sheva with a caption boasting about how they'd gotten the last shot in. What can we say in the face of such pettiness and such evil? I think we just let it speak for itself. In any case, Israel got its own last shots in, and it wasn't against civilian apartment buildings. Reports emerged already on Tuesday morning that in the nighttime hours, Israeli strikes on Tehran had resulted in the elimination of another senior nuclear scientist as well as other strategic assets of the Revolutionary Guards. The task now is to ensure that the military victory that the IDF has won in this war does not end up being a diplomatic and strategic defeat, leaving the Ayatollah regime in Iran able to build its nuclear program and continue tormenting Israel and the entire Middle East. Welcome to Boots on the Ground. I'm your host, Yair Pinto, and together with TBN Israel senior Middle East analyst Mati Shoshani, we bring you all the truth about what is happening in Israel. On Monday evening in Washington, D.C., President Donald Trump made a dramatic announcement on his social media account saying that Israel and Iran had agreed to a ceasefire which would go into effect in a few hours. Neither Iran nor Israel immediately confirmed the news, and as I already told you, the introduction, Iran began launching a series of barrages of ballistic missiles just a few hours later. When their barrages were over, the regime sent out a ludicrously absurd announcement that they had imposed a ceasefire on Israel and the Americans that took place after they launched a barrage of missiles on an American base in Qatar, which they said had completely destroyed that base. That last part is obviously untrue at all, as the Qatari air defenses shut down all the Iranian missiles except one, which was allowed to land in an open area, causing no damage. TBN Israel senior Middle East analyst Mati Shoshani will take us through all the details of the ceasefire announcement that caught everyone by surprise. But first, let's circle back to the story that most of us went to bed last night thinking would be the big event that everyone would be talking about today. On Monday evening, the IRGC launched a barrage of short and medium-range ballistic missiles at El Ubaid Air Base in Qatar, where over 10,000 United States military personnel and dozens of aircrafts are located. It's important to note that the Iranians let everyone know that they were planning to launch this strike beforehand, and they also let it be known that this was the retaliation for the United States strike on their nuclear facilities on Sunday. The Qatari air defense systems had plenty of time to get ready for it, and when it came, the incoming missiles were all intercepted and no damage was done to the base, and no American or Qatari personnel were harmed. Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates issued statements strongly condemning Iran for the attack, but President Donald Trump mocked them of this attack, calling it weak and appearing to laugh it off, not even mentioning that he was considering responding to it because it just isn't worth it. He also thanked Iran for giving advanced warning of the attack, which allowed time for the effects to be minimized and in the event completely avoided. Nevertheless, one Iranian official said that Iran's attacks on the United States facilities in the region would continue, and the regime officially declared that they called Operation Herald of Victory as a successful effort at avenging Iran's humiliating loss of their nuclear facilities at Fordo, Isfahan, and Natanz. As a footnote, one missile also fired in the direction of United States facilities in Iraq, but it didn't hit anything, and oil prices immediately fell following the news of the impotent Iranian attack, and the entire matter is likely to soon be forgotten because of the much bigger news that came a short time later when President Trump announced a ceasefire. So, how did we reach a ceasefire? It is with mixed feelings that I must tell you that Qatar mediated between Iran and the United States after Israel told President Trump that we're ready to wrap this war up because we'd accomplished all of our strategic objectives. It was during this back and forth that the Iranians informed Qatar and the United States that before they agreed to a ceasefire, they needed to make a symbolic attack on the American base in order to save face and not look like they had surrendered in the face of superior military force. It was with all this in mind that President Donald Trump posted a message on social media on Monday evening saying that the war's end would become official on Wednesday at 7 a.m. Israel time after both states finished and complete their final tasks. Unofficial but apparently correct information of this by both Iranian and Israeli officials was soon announced by various media outlets. Later, a more official Israeli government announcement said that Jerusalem achieved all the objectives of Operation Rising Lion and far beyond. It added that Israel removed from itself an immediate existential double threat, both in the nuclear field and in the field of ballistic missiles. In light of achieving the operation's goals and in full coordination with President Trump, Israel agreed to the president's proposal for a bilateral ceasefire. Israel will respond forcefully to any violation of this ceasefire. That's the official announcement from the Israeli government. But here at TBN Israel, we have a few announcements of our own to make. We'll start with the fact that up until the end of hostilities, Israeli aircraft continue to hit Iranian military targets and also hit both symbols of the regime's power and also elements of the regime's control mechanisms over its own population. This included the notorious Evin Prison in Tehran, headquarters of the Basij militia, whose purpose is to terrorize ordinary Iranians into submitting to the cruel tyranny of this regime. And last but not least, the Israel doom clock in central Tehran, which supposedly counting down to the time until Israel is supposed to disappear from the face of this earth. Some might call this trolling or maybe counter-trolling, but these strikes served a serious purpose. The concentrated attack overnight between Monday and Tuesday on the power bases of the Ayatollah regime had a dual goal: to deter Iran from continuing missile launchers and to respond to the American blow, while simultaneously encouraging an uprising in Iran by striking the regime's security apparatus. Thus, at the end of the campaign against Israel, regime opponents can try to take back their country, and I hope they have great success in doing so. But just in case they don't, Israeli aircraft also used the last few hours before the ceasefire went into effect to hit hard the strategic assets of the IRGC. This included the IRGC naval base at the port of Bandar Abbas and long-range radar systems used to detect Israeli fighter jets en route to Iran. In parallel, the IDF spokesperson's unit in Persian called twice during the night for evacuations in Tehran, in Menaran neighborhood and districts 6 and 7, which preceded a wave of strikes in which senior figures and Iranian nuclear scientists were eliminated. The Air Force also hit missile launchers ready to fire at Israeli territory, along with other strategic targets, including the headquarters of several security and military districts across the country. Now, let's move on, because we need to look at the other war that many people forgot about these last 2 weeks. So, what is happening right now in the Gaza Strip? In the war against the terror organization Hamas, less than 2 months after the start of Operation Gideon's Chariots, the IDF controls 70 to 75% of the territory of the Gaza Strip, and Hamas's capabilities are badly damaged. It is struggling to recruit operatives and pay salaries, and protests against Hamas and armed gangs willing to fight it are increasing throughout Gaza. Now, with Iran no longer in position to send Hamas any additional assistance, things have never looked darker for this evil terrorist organization. However, there's another issue at stake here. With all the optimism over the ceasefire, we must examine concerns about whether World War III is on the horizon. After the United States strike on Iran, Russia expressed its anger beyond the scenes, and President Putin went so far as to threaten that Russia might supply Iran with nuclear warheads. The American response was not long in the coming. We'll tell you all about that. For now, the ceasefire has taken effect, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is saying that Israel met all the operation's objectives, and President Trump is making a polite request saying the ceasefire has begun. Please do not violate it. So guys, we have a lot to talk about today, so let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report about what is happening in Israel on day 626 of the war against Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shia militias in Iraq, and all the other armed groups in this region operating under the control of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, which is the head of the axis of evil in the Middle East. And a moment before we begin, I want to call on you to keep showing up for Israel's hardest war, the war for the truth. While the forces of evil around the world run propaganda and lie about Israel, we at TBN Israel will keep spreading the truth, and would be happy if you'd join us in this effort. You can do that by giving this video a like, share, and subscribe to this channel. And also, you can help us by hitting the donate button and never missing another episode of Boots on the Ground. Let's start with the moments just before the ceasefire and with the Israeli Air Force strikes on Iran. All day on Monday and throughout the night, Israeli Air Force fighter jets carried out pinpoint strikes in the heart of Tehran, the capital of Iran. The strikes, carried out under precise direction from the Intelligence Directorate, were aimed at headquarters and assets of the Iranian Internal Security Forces and the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps. The forces struck were composed of various corps and commanders responsible for a range of missiles, including brutalizing the population of Iran, or, as they would say, internal security, with the overall aim of maintaining the regime's grip on power and domestic stability. In the course of the airstrikes, the besieged headquarters was hit, together with other targets. This is one of the core power centers of the Revolutionary Guards, whose tasks include enforcing the Islamic Code of Conduct and reporting citizens who violate it to the authorities. Striking this headquarters is a blow both to the military capabilities and to the civilian repression capabilities of this regime. In addition, the barrage corps responsible for defending several cities in Tehran province against various threats and for maintaining regime stability was struck, as were the intelligence police and the general security of the internal security forces. These bodies, too, are an integral part of the regime's military force, but their main job is to protect the regime from the people. In addition to hitting these Gestapo-like internal security forces, the Israeli Air Force also hit additional assets of this regime, including yet another nuclear scientist, Mohammad Reza Sadeghi, whose elimination was confirmed by state media reports on Tuesday morning. This was accompanied by an acknowledgement that the United States State Department had imposed sanctions on him 2 months ago because of his involvement in the nuclear field. The Mechar news agency, which is another regime mouthpiece, also admitted on Monday evening that at least 7 members of the Iranian Navy were eliminated in an Israeli strike on the port of Bandar Abbas. And amidst all of this kinetic activity, and while ceasefire talks were underway between Iran and the United States, the IDF spokesperson's unit in Persian posted an evacuation warning to all those in the Mekharan area and District 6 in Tehran. And according to the notice posted on X, the IDF will operate in these areas as it has in recent days throughout Iran to strike the military infrastructure of the Iranian regime. It also said that for the citizens' safety, the IDF calls on them to leave the area immediately and not to approach it in the coming hours. A short time later, the IDF issued a similar notice to the residents of District 7 in the Iranian capital. And afterwards, dozens of loud explosions were heard across Tehran for the second time that night. And after United States President Donald Trump's announcement of the ceasefire, heavy Israeli Air Force strikes continued across Iran against dozens of targets, including in Tehran. The IDF spokesperson's unit office issued a statement minutes before the ceasefire was to take effect, saying that the Air Force had destroyed missile launchers that had been ready for launch as part of the salvo fire towards Israeli territory in the recent hours. On that note, I have a personal comment on all of this. The Iranians want to say that they got the last shot in by hitting an apartment building in Be'er Sheva with a ballistic missile just minutes before the ceasefire went into effect. They also want to brag about how they made the Americans come begging for a ceasefire after destroying the El Udeid base in Qatar, despite the fact that they didn't manage to land even one single missile on that base and that the Americans weren't begging them for anything at all. All this regime has to offer is lies, deceit, and gaslighting. But they're not fooling anyone because the truth is apparent for everybody to see. The only people the IRGC can do anything to hurt are the ordinary civilians of Iran, who are the biggest victims of their brutality and their violence. I think the whole world deserves to be free of this wicked and ridiculous regime, and nobody deserves to be rid of them more than the Iranian people themselves. But Israeli people also deserve to be rid of them, along with everyone else who lives inside the Middle East. In any case, guys, here at TBN Israel, we will keep bringing you the whole truth, boots on the ground style, and straight from the field. We'd be glad if you stand with us in sharing the truth. You can do that by hitting the subscribe button and sharing these videos. Now, a moment ago, I spoke about how the people of this regime deserve to be rid of this terrible regime in Iran. But even if that happens, there will still be a huge mess to clean up here in Israel, and it's not going to be easy, and we're going to need a lot of help. Since the war with Iran began on June 13, thousands of reserve soldiers have been called back to duty. While they serve, their families and their businesses are left behind to face the economic fallout. Shops are closed, orders are cancelled, income disappears overnight, and for many small businesses and business owners and artisans across Israel, this moment is critical. Arza is helping fill that gap. They work directly with local markets, buying their handcrafted goods and shipping them to homes around the world through their subscription boxes. Every box provides meaningful support, keeping businesses alive and families going forward during this uncertain time. Anyone who subscribes is not just receiving something beautiful from the Holy Land, they're helping people get back on their feet. So guys, please use the code TBNIL and get an extra 10% off your subscription And also, it will help us create more content here in Israel. So to learn more or subscribe, visit www.artsabox.com/TBNIL. Again, that's www.artsabox.com/TBNIL, and make sure to insert the coupon code TBNIL for an extra 10% off your subscription. Thank you for standing with Israel. Let's continue, and I want to start by reviewing one of the strategies that Israel used against Iran in this campaign. On Monday, the State of Israel launched a concentrated offensive on the power bases of the Ayatollah regime in Iran, aiming to weaken them so as to enable a popular uprising in the future. From the start of Operation Rising Lion, the IDF has struck regime symbols, but then it also began to directly attack the security bodies whose job is to preserve the regime's survival in Iran. The targets are the Revolutionary Guards, its internal security apparatus, and the Basaj militia, and the goal is to weaken and destabilize these bodies which have suppressed uprising in the past and still do so that Iran and the Ayatollah regime will survive. The second objective of these strikes is to create a new equation for the regime, letting it know that if it keeps launching missiles at Israeli civilians, Israel will threaten what is most important to it, its own survival. And according to most analysts, an uprising in Iran, if and when it comes, will not happen immediately. True, there are elements, even armed ones, who are waiting to rise against the Ayatollah regime, but the assessment is that if it happens, it will only be happening after the military campaign with Israel will end. The reason is that as long as Israeli aircrafts and attacks continue, the masses are first of all afraid to take to the streets, while the regime supporters, and there are many, continue to rally around the Ayatollahs. Therefore, if an uprising does come, it will happen only when the regime's opponents can leave their homes, communicate with each other, and organize in order to act. And meanwhile, striking the regime's symbols and the power bases is meant to increase pressure on the regime in anticipation of ending the war on the best possible terms. In this context, the bombing of the entrance to the dreaded Evin Prison is of great symbolic significance. The prison itself was not bombed so as not to kill the inmates, but the security means around it were eroded, perhaps even to encourage escape. In addition, notice that the assault on the Ayatollah's watchdogs is taking place only in the Tehran area and its industrial hinterland, presenting the regime with a direct and immediate threat. Unfortunately, no one in Israel's security establishment or intelligence communities believes this will bring an immediate uprising, but it will allow regime opponents to act spontaneously at the war's end or shortly afterwards. All of this is speculative, and we'll have to see what happens next. But one thing that you can be sure of is that TBN Israel will be here to continue reporting on all the details in this war. And guys, if you want to continue receiving these updates, be sure to click on the subscribe button if you haven't already, so that you stay tuned to the truth in real time and never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. And circling back to the Revolutionary Guards and their need to save face despite suffering a humiliating defeat at the hands of the IDF and the United States military on Monday, they attempted to carry out an attack on the El Ubaid Air Base in Qatar, the largest American military facility in the Middle East, housing over 10,000 personnel. The strike was carried out roughly a day and a half after the American strike on Iran's nuclear facilities, and Tehran dubbed the missile launch towards the base Operation Herald of Victory, and falsely claimed it was powerful and destructive and succeeded in striking the base. But the truth is that hours beforehand, the IRGC gave Qatar advance notice of its intention to strike the base, and the forces there prepared in advance. The Iranian missiles were intercepted, And according to American sources, not a single missile hit the base, whose military aircraft had already been redeployed to other bases last week. And following the phony attack by the IRGC on Monday evening, the instruction for the United States citizens in Qatar to shelter in places was also lifted, and within a few hours, the Emirates airspace, which had been closed, was reopened. Kuwait and the United Arab Emirates reopened their own airspace a short time later. And amidst all of this, CNN reported that despite the exchange of military blows, President Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff remained in contact with Iranian figures. Two sources familiar with the matter also noted that Iranians' difficulty in communicating with the Supreme Leader Khamenei are evident. As has widely been reported, Iran's glorious Supreme Leader has been hiding in a secret place since the Israeli strikes began, and communication between him and his subordinates has been sporadic. But he will have to approve any major decision, certainly one concerning the renewal of nuclear talks. And according to CNN, obtaining information from him has recently become increasingly difficult, and therefore the channels between the United States and Iran, both direct and indirect, have been virtually severed. In Israel, it was assessed even before the attack that Iran would act in a symbolic, limited, and coordinated way against the United States in order to be able to say that they responded to the US strikes. Some say all politics is a kind of theater, and in the Middle East, that is very true. In this case, Iranian sources quoted in the New York Times report confirmed that this assessment and said that Iran had to carry out a symbolic strike on the United States and at the same time execute it in such a way that all sides would have an exit ramp from it. And according to them, the response is similar to what Iran did after the American elimination of Quds Force commander Qasem Soleimani in 2020, when it fired a salvo of missiles at American bases in Iraq, but only after giving advance notice. Nevertheless, United States President Donald Trump posted a mocking message about the Iranian attacks on the American base in Qatar, effectively declaring his intention to ignite that strike and avoid another round of escalation with Iran. In a post on his social media account, Trump described the Iranian attack on El Udeid, in which there were no casualties and no damage, as very weak, and even thanked Tehran for the advance notice that gave Qatar, allowing the Americans to prepare for the attack and thus avoid casualties. Trump expressed hope that now peace could be achieved in this region and sounded as if hinting that Israel too should refrain from further strikes. His statement came shortly after Tehran also signaled readiness to return to the negotiating table, and a senior official in Tehran in the regime told Reuters that Tehran has the necessary logic to open talks now after what he called punishing the aggression. However, as I noted a moment ago, any decision on the way forward for Iran will require a green light from Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who at least in a post on his X account sounded a tough tone toward the United States. The post, accompanied by an AI image of an American flag in flames, read, ostensibly in Khamenei's name, "We did not attack anyone, and we do not accept anyone's attacks, and we will not surrender to anyone's attack. This is the logic of the Iranian nation." And my response to Khamenei is, yeah, whatever. We're not believing or buying anything that you're saying. Guys, let me know what you think in the comments. Do you agree with Khamenei? What do you have to say to this evil man? We want to hear it, and hopefully he's watching as well. In any case, guys, here at TBN Israel, we will continue to bring you the most detailed information on what is happening right now in Israel and the Middle East. So keep spreading the truth and enlist to stand with the truth about what is happening in Israel. Please keep spreading the truth, share and follow us. It's very important. Give a click on the donate button and support us. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button so that you stay tuned to what's happening in Israel and know how to pray for the situation. Now, we turn to TBN Israel's senior Middle East analyst Mati Shoshani, who will take us through how we woke up to a ceasefire with Iran this morning. Mati, after Iran fired at an American base, they began saying that Trump was desperately begging for a ceasefire. What happened in those hours, and how will it influence the road ahead? Will it really be quiet now? Are the Iranians close to toppling the Revolutionary Guards in Iran? Over to you, Mati Shoshani.
In just 12 days, the Israeli Air Force, together with the American Air Force, brought down the government of Iran. This supervillain that for years we feared attacking is no longer the threat it was expected to be. Just this morning, a ceasefire agreement is signed between Israel, the US, and the Iranians that stops aggression. Whether or not the ceasefire will hold for more than just a couple days, well, that's to be determined. But here's the incredible story of how this all happened. So it all starts about last night. President Trump, as his habit is, approaches social media and comes out with several very, very humiliating messages towards the Iranians. Now, I'll remind you, if you didn't watch our live broadcast late last night, we reported on the fact that the Iranian response to that American and Israeli attack that took place over the last couple of days was a feeble and weak attack. In fact, so weak that the Iranians called the Americans in advance to warn them of their imminent attack, making sure that the bases they attacked were empty of soldiers. And President Trump makes the point to publicly shame the Iranians, saying, look, your attack, your response was weak, your attack was meaningless, you've shown your weakness. And then he goes on to the next phase, which is bringing the Iranians to a solution, bringing them to a ceasefire agreement. So late last night, President Trump calls on the Israeli government and says, are you ready to go to a ceasefire agreement? The Israeli War Cabinet gathers together late last night, and they look at what we've achieved. And they give the US the green light, saying, look, we've achieved the majority of our war objectives, and we've done so decisively. We've done so in a manner that is publicly known, and we know that from here we're able to reach an agreement where the Iranians don't have nuclear capabilities. And it gets better. President Trump approaches the Qataris and he says, guys, I need you, the Emir of Qatar, reach out to the Iranians, tell them that Israel is in the game, that we're in the game, and we need them to agree to a ceasefire agreement. And the Iranians do exactly that. They agree to a ceasefire agreement several hours later. And about 3 a.m. Israel time, last night, President Trump tweets, or puts actually out on his social network, or several social networks, the announcement saying, look, we've agreed to a ceasefire agreement that's going to take effect early tomorrow morning. The Iranians first, followed by the Israelis. Israel's in the loop, the Iranians are in the loop. It seems like a historic moment has taken place. And what led up to that moment is the fact that for 12 days, the Israeli Air Force, together with the American Air Force that later joined the game, dominated the Iranian airspace. And before that, there were several days where Israeli intelligence proved that it had penetrated deep into the Iranian society, government, IRGC, and nuclear program by targeting dozens at this point, of the high uppers, the leaders of the Iranian nuclear program, the IRGC, and the Iranian military. And that brought us to this moment, a moment in time where the US, Israel, and the Iranians reach a ceasefire agreement under which the Iranians agree to completely cease all acts of aggression. This is nothing short of history. I don't think anyone could have imagined that this would happen in a matter of just 12 days. And I don't think anyone could have guessed, maybe aside from Mossad agents, that it would have been done in such a conclusive, such an overwhelming, and such a public way. Israel dominated the Iranian airspace in just a matter of hours, and it was able to fly attack sorties over Iranian skies and cities undisturbed by Iranian air defenses, air force, or anything else. And the Iranian counterstrike against Israel, though painful, was much smaller in level and scope than we were fearing. We're now able to move forward into a ceasefire agreement that will leave the Iranians without a nuclear plan, nuclear capabilities, and the nuclear stockpiles that they've been working so hard to gather. But here's the important part. The story doesn't end there. Early this morning, myself, as well as everyone else in Israel, was woken up abruptly by Iranian rockets. A barrage of them, most of which were just randomly fired, but at least several struck ground and caused damage, one of them killing 4 people in Be'er Sheva, which is the biggest city in southern Israel. Israeli Minister of Defense Katz immediately said that this is a clear violation of the ceasefire agreement. And since that attack, there have been several smaller attacks on Israel, all indicating that the Iranians aren't doing a really good job of upholding the ceasefire agreement. As the ceasefire is announced, President Trump warns the Iranians, and he says that any small violation will be answered by an immediate attack by the B-2 bombers that caused so much damage in Iran just a couple of days ago. But the Iranians did violate the ceasefire agreement, and they did so more than once, and yet there hasn't been a response. And as I'm recording this, so just hours before you're watching this, or just a couple hours before you're watching this, Israeli Air Force pilots allegedly, I'll explain how we get to this conclusion, went back to Iran to return bombing missions. President Trump takes to social media, warning Israel, says, turn your pilots back, don't drop bombs on Iran, don't blow up, pun intended, the ceasefire agreement. So once again, while Israel is contemplating and planning the retaliation to this Iranian violation or blatant violation of the ceasefire agreement, President Trump warns Israel publicly over social media saying, don't violate the ceasefire agreement, don't drop a bomb on Iran, because we are trying to uphold this agreement. Now let's talk about what this agreement means. One, it's historical. There's no question about that. Two, it is very significant in the sense that in a swift, powerful, decisive move, Israel, together with the US, brought down the Iranian regime that has spent hundreds of billions of dollars and decades building a war machine to destroy Israel. We've proven them to be weak. We've proven them to lack the resolute sense or spirit that is needed to fight against us. And we've proven that their mechanism, their government, is not as functioning as we imagined it to be. Their government is corrupt, their military is inefficient, and they were unable to stop Israel and absolutely not stop the US in a way that was unpredictable. The Iranians have exposed their underbelly, their vulnerability in a way that is greater than anyone could have expected. Again, possibly aside from the Israeli Mossad, which, according to foreign press, has essentially lived within Iran for the last couple of years. So where do we go from here? First of all, the announcement of the ceasefire agreement was accepted with great positivity in Israel. The airports open up again, stock markets are doing well, people are expressing both positivity and also showing an economic uptick around the world with an expectation of this conflict fizzling out in days to come. But there's a couple of key components here that have to be upheld. One, we need to make sure that the Iranians uphold the ceasefire and are upheld to the ceasefire, that they don't get a chance to violate it, not even once. The second part is that now that we've solved, quote unquote, or resolved for now the Iranian issue, the next thing is we have to deal with the hostage situation in the Gaza Strip. There is no reality where we can move forward without resolving that. And the third thing is, now is the time to be detail-oriented, to stick to the small minutiae of the agreement, and for the Israelis and the Americans to make sure the Iranians don't have the ability to once again build a nuclear program. That means having supervisors on the ground. That means responding with military force to every attack that takes place. That means not seeking peace, but seeking power and strength, and through that, peace and a ceasefire agreement with the Iranians. That, we've learned, is the only path forward. In fact, all of this ceasefire agreement wouldn't have been possible if Israel wasn't daring enough to attack the Iranians on the night of June the 13th. To do so in a bold way, in a way that took a lot of risk into calculation and brought down many targets around Iran in a manner that was both impressive and showed the depth of our intelligence, our knowledge, the military power that was built into creating a solution for the Iranian problem. I feel like everyone around the world should sigh with a sigh of relief today, knowing that one big enemy is at least less dangerous this night than it was yesterday. Now back to Yair Pinto.
So thank you very much, Mati, for all the important details that you give us. Dear guys, I'd also be happy to hear in the comments what you think about the United States administration's decision for a ceasefire with Iran. We will keep spreading the truth, so share and follow us, and most importantly, hit that subscribe button so that you stay tuned to the truth and never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. Before we conclude today's report, let's take a look at the war front that so many forgot about over the past 2 weeks, except those who were fighting on it and their families and their friends. I'm talking, of course, about the war in the Gaza Strip, where Operation Gideon's Chariots to defeat the Hamas terrorist organization didn't take any breaks, while Operation Rising Lion was demolishing Iran's renegade nuclear program. Less than 2 months after the start of Operation Gideon's Chariots in the Gaza Strip, the IDF has already taken control of about 70 to 75% of the Gaza Strip's territory, and this is according to a report in the Israel Hayom news portal. The forces are now continuing to clear the area to destroy tunnels and deal with pockets of resistance of terrorists. And according to senior IDF officers, although 4 soldiers were killed in action last week, there are few combat incidents in the Gaza Strip, and Hamas is mainly trying to harass the forces while the troops' actions are highly effective. The IDF believes that Hamas's capabilities have been severely damaged and the amount of weaponry it possesses is limited. It is finding it difficult to smuggle in additional arms. It almost is unable to recruit operatives because it struggles to pay the salaries, and even those it does recruit, it is finding hard to train. So the IDF further believes that Hamas's fear of a popular uprising by the Gazan public against it is real. And even now, there are more demonstrations against the terrorist organization and several armed gangs are rising up to fight it. Now, it will be clear to everybody that Iran is not able to send Hamas any more help, so they're on their own to try and deal with this situation as best they can. At the same time, as we saw this week as well, the IDF continues to make great efforts to return hostages to Israeli territory and makes clear that this is the IDF's mission. And during intense operational activity carried out last week, combat teams of the 401st Brigade operating under Division 162 focused on operations in the area of the village of Jabalia in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. As part of the operation, engineering battalion fighters, working closely with the brigade, conducted through sweeps, investigated, and destroyed a large number of underground routes. These tunnels were used by Hamas terrorists for various purposes, including hiding, moving fighters and weapons, and even prolonged stays. But they won't be doing that any longer. The destruction of the underground routes, whose total length exceeded 2.5 kilometers, constitutes a significant blow to Hamas's terror infrastructure in the Jabalia area and helps neutralize the organization's operational and offensive capabilities. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to update you with all the truth about what is happening in Israel. So keep spreading the truth, share, and follow us. And most importantly, pray. Pray for our hostages who are still held in the hands of Hamas's terrible terrorists in Gaza. Keep praying that they return home quickly. Pray for the IDF soldiers wherever they are, if they're in the air, at sea, or on land. Pray for the peace of the people of Israel, and above all, do not forget to pray for the peace of Jerusalem.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.